walls of USP Lewisburg, notorious inmates, violent alliances, and hidden gang power. USP Lewisburg does not announce itself as one of America's most dangerous prisons. There are no towering myths like Alcatraz, no Hollywood dramatizations, no glossy documentaries replayed year after year. What makes Lewisburg different is quieter, more suffocating. Its danger is not theatrical. It is procedural. It is institutional. And for the men locked behind its walls, it is constant. Located in rural Pennsylvania, the United States Penitentiary at Lewisburg was designed to break inmates down through control, isolation, and relentless routine. Over the decades, it has housed some of the most notorious federal prisoners in the country, violent offenders, organized crime figures, domestic terrorists, and gang leaders deemed too dangerous, too disruptive, or too influential for lower security institutions. But Lewisburg is not just a prison. It is a pressure chamber. This chapter explores how power truly functions inside USP Lewisburg, how violent alliances form, how gangs operate beneath the surface, and how survival often depends less on strength than on understanding the unspoken rules of the yard. A prison built for control. USP Lewisburg opened in 1932, originally designed to reflect the prevailing philosophy of the time: strict discipline creates obedience. Silence, isolation, and punishment were not side effects, they were features. The prison became infamous for its use of control units long before the term supermax entered public vocabulary. By the late 20th century, Lewisburg had evolved into a high-security federal penitentiary with specialized housing units, including the Special Management Unit, or SMU. This unit was designed to hold inmates with histories of extreme violence, gang leadership, or disruptive behavior across the federal prison system. Inmates sent to Lewisburg are often not first-time offenders. Many arrive with long disciplinary records, multiple stints in segregation, and reputations that precede them. The Bureau of Prisons does not send men here to rehabilitate them quickly. It sends them here to contain them. And containment has consequences. The population nobody talks about. What makes Lewisburg uniquely volatile is not simply the severity of crimes committed by its inmates, it is the concentration of influence. Many prisoners housed here are not foot soldiers. They are organizers, enforcers, and decision-makers from criminal networks that extend far beyond the prison walls. Street gang shot callers. White supremacist leaders. High-ranking members of prison-born gangs. Individuals with the ability to command loyalty, coordinate violence, and manipulate systems. When these men are placed together, conflict is inevitable. But conflict does not always look like chaos. At Lewisburg, violence is often calculated. Planned. Strategic. A tool rather than an impulse. The illusion of separation. On paper, the prison is segmented by race, gang affiliation, and security classification. In practice, these divisions are fluid. Alliances shift. Temporary truces form. Enemies become business partners when circumstances demand it. Gangs inside Lewisburg understand one fundamental truth: open warfare attracts attention. And attention brings lockdowns, transfers, and loss of control. So power is exercised quietly. Messages are passed through coded language, legal paperwork, and indirect communication. Orders are delivered without witnesses. Discipline is enforced away from cameras whenever possible. A man may appear isolated, but behind him stands an invisible structure. Correctional officers know this. Intelligence units monitor communications constantly. But even surveillance has limits. The most effective operations are the ones that appear ordinary. Violence as a language. When violence occurs inside USP Lewisburg, it is rarely spontaneous. Each incident sends a message, to rivals, to allies, or to the administration. A single assault can redefine hierarchy on a housing unit. A refusal to retaliate can be interpreted as weakness. An overreaction can trigger weeks of lockdown and scrutiny. Inmates learn quickly that survival is about balance. Too passive, and you become a target. Too aggressive, and you become a liability. Those who last understand when violence is necessary, and when restraint is the smarter option. This is not morality. It is mathematics. Racial lines and gang realities. Race plays a significant role in prison life, but at Lewisburg, it is not the full story. While racial identity often determines initial alignment, deeper loyalty lies with gang affiliation and shared interests. White supremacist groups, black prison gangs, Hispanic organizations, and independent crews all operate within overlapping territories of influence. Their relationships are shaped less by ideology and more by logistics, access to resources, protection, and leverage. Temporary alliances form to oppose common threats. Trade agreements exist for contraband distribution. Even enemies may coexist if conflict threatens collective stability. This uneasy equilibrium can collapse instantly. A perceived insult. A debt unpaid. A rumor believed. And when it does, the response is swift. The cost of reputation. At Lewisburg, reputation is currency. A man's past follows him through the gates, whispered from cell to cell. Some arrive with names that command immediate respect. Others arrive unknown, and that can be dangerous. New inmates are tested. Not always violently, but psychologically. Pressured to choose sides. Asked to carry messages. Given small tasks with hidden consequences. Each decision is observed and remembered. Those who fail the test may find themselves isolated, or worse, labeled unreliable. And once a label sticks inside a prison like Lewisburg, it is nearly impossible to remove. Control units and psychological pressure. The SMU and segregation units at Lewisburg are infamous for their psychological toll. Inmates can spend months, even years, under conditions of extreme restriction, limited human contact, constant surveillance, and rigid schedules. These environments are intended to disrupt gang operations by isolating leadership. Sometimes they succeed. Other times, they merely change how communication occurs. Influence does not require proximity. Some of the most powerful inmates operate from isolation, issuing guidance through intermediaries, manipulating paperwork, and leveraging outside contacts. The system constrains bodies, but minds adapt. The staff perspective. Correctional officers at USP Lewisburg walk a narrow line. Many are experienced, highly trained, and fully aware of the dynamics at play. They know which inmates carry influence. They recognize patterns. They anticipate tension. But managing a population like Lewisburg's is a constant challenge. Officers must enforce rules without escalating conflict. Show authority without provoking retaliation. Maintain distance without losing situational awareness. One mistake, a missed signal, a delayed response, can turn routine movement into a crisis. This is not a place where complacency survives. When the balance breaks. Despite all precautions, Lewisburg has experienced moments when control slips. Sudden outbreaks of violence. Coordinated assaults. Lockdowns that stretch for days. Each incident reveals how fragile the balance truly is. When order collapses, the response is absolute, full lockdown, movement suspended, privileges revoked. Everyone pays the price, guilty or not. And afterward, the prison resets. New alliances form. Old scores resurface. The cycle continues. Survival without illusion. There is no redemption arc inside USP Lewisburg. No cinematic transformation. Survival is not about becoming stronger or smarter in a heroic sense, it is about adaptation. Men who endure learn to read rooms, manage perceptions, and control emotion. They understand that the most dangerous moments are often the quiet ones. The absence of noise does not mean safety. It means something is being decided. The prison within the prison. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Lewisburg is not the violence itself, but the invisible systems that govern daily life. An inmate may follow every official rule and still fall victim to unofficial ones. The prison administration controls movement. The gangs control meaning. And between them exists a space where individuals navigate moment by moment, choice by choice. For some, Lewisburg is a temporary stop. For others, it becomes a defining chapter of their existence. Closing reflection. USP Lewisburg does not need legends to instill fear. Its reputation is built on reality, on the slow grind of power struggles, silent negotiations, and ever-present threat of violence beneath enforced order. Behind its walls, danger does not scream. It waits. And for those inside, understanding that truth is often the difference between enduring and disappearing. Inside USP Lewisburg, violence does not begin with fists or weapons. It begins with people. Specific men, carriers of reputation, influence, and fear, shape the environment long before a single confrontation occurs. Their presence alters the balance of the yard, the tempo of daily life, and the unspoken rules everyone else must follow. This chapter is not about legends or exaggerations. It is about how individual inmates, through history, connections, and calculated behavior, become centers of gravity inside one of the federal system's most controlled environments. At Lewisburg, power is personal before it is organizational. Reputation arrives before the inmate. When a new inmate is transferred into USP Lewisburg, he does not arrive anonymously. His paperwork travels first. His disciplinary history is reviewed. His prior affiliations are flagged. Intelligence units already know who he is. But more importantly, other inmates know. Reputation spreads faster than official records. A man known for enforcing gang discipline, orchestrating assaults, or refusing to cooperate with authorities is recognized immediately. Sometimes within hours of arrival, word reaches the housing units. This early recognition determines everything. Where he is allowed to sit. Who approaches him. Who avoids him. Whether he is tested, or left alone. In Lewisburg, reputation is not about fame. It is about predictability. Other inmates want to know how dangerous you are, how loyal you are, and whether interacting with you will bring consequences. The difference between violent and influential. Not every violent inmate holds power. This distinction is critical. Some men arrive at Lewisburg because they cannot control themselves, impulsive offenders who lash out, accumulate infractions, and force the system to isolate them. These inmates are dangerous, but they are not influential. Influential inmates are different. They are patient, controlled, often quiet. They understand how to delay gratification, how to delegate risk, and how to avoid direct involvement whenever possible. These individuals rarely fight unless absolutely necessary. When violence occurs around them, it often appears indirect, an argument elsewhere, an unexplained assault, a sudden shift in unit dynamics. Their strength is not physical dominance. It is strategic presence. Gang leadership behind concrete walls. Lewisburg has housed high-ranking members of multiple prison gangs and extremist organizations over the years. Many were transferred specifically to disrupt their leadership roles elsewhere. But leadership does not disappear with relocation. Inside Lewisburg, gang leaders adapt their methods. Communication becomes fragmented. Orders are implied rather than stated. Authority is exercised through trusted intermediaries. A leader may never raise his voice, threaten anyone, or visibly assert dominance. His authority is assumed. Other inmates enforce it for him. This structure protects the leader from direct discipline while maintaining control over group behavior. It also creates plausible deniability, a critical survival tactic in a heavily monitored institution. The myth of isolation. One of the Bureau of Prisons' primary strategies at Lewisburg has been isolation, especially through the Special Management Unit. The assumption is simple: remove leaders from their networks, and influence collapses. Reality is more complicated. Isolation slows communication, but it does not eliminate it. Some of the most influential inmates in Lewisburg's history operated from restricted housing. Their names alone carried weight. Even without direct contact, their past actions defined expectations. Their ideology, reputation, and established rules continue to guide group behavior. In some cases, isolation enhanced their mystique. An unseen authority can be more powerful than a visible one. Domestic extremists and ideological power. Lewisburg has also housed individuals convicted of domestic terrorism and extremist violence. These inmates bring a different form of influence, ideological rather than organizational. While not all extremists align with traditional prison gangs, their presence introduces volatility. Ideology can override pragmatism. Belief systems may justify violence that would otherwise be strategically avoided. This creates tension. Prison gangs rely on stability to function. Extremist inmates often challenge that stability by prioritizing symbolism over survival. As a result, these individuals are closely monitored, not only by staff, but by other inmates who see them as unpredictable liabilities. In Lewisburg, unpredictability is dangerous. The enforcers, invisible but essential. For every influential inmate, there are enforcers, men who carry out discipline, collect debts, and handle confrontations. These individuals are rarely well known outside the prison. Inside, they are feared. Enforcers tend to be younger, physically capable, and willing to absorb punishment. They accept disciplinary sanctions as part of their role. Their value lies in action, not longevity. In Lewisburg, enforcers rotate frequently due to transfers, segregation, or injury. The system replaces them as needed. The leader remains. How conflicts actually begin. Contrary to popular belief, most serious conflicts at Lewisburg do not begin with personal insults or spontaneous anger. They begin with breaches of expectation. Common triggers include failure to repay debts, disrespecting racial or gang boundaries, communicating with prohibited individuals, suspected cooperation with authorities. Often, the person targeted does not fully understand the rule he violated. By the time he realizes something is wrong, the response is already in motion. Warnings are subtle. Silence replaces conversation. Eye contact disappears. Movement patterns shift. These are signs. Ignoring them is a mistake. The role of fear in maintaining order. Fear inside Lewisburg is not chaotic. It is structured. Inmates fear consequences more than violence itself. Retaliation may not be immediate. It may not be obvious. It may come through isolation, exclusion, or indirect pressure. This delayed response reinforces discipline. You may not know who decided your fate. You may not know when it will happen. But you know it will. This uncertainty keeps the system functioning. Staff intervention and its limits. Correctional staff at Lewisburg actively attempt to disrupt influential inmates through transfers, housing reassignments, Communication restrictions. Intelligence monitoring. Sometimes these efforts succeed. Other times, they backfire. Removing a known leader can create a power vacuum, triggering internal conflict as others compete to replace him. This instability often leads to more violence, not less. As a result, staff decisions are cautious. Disruption must be calculated. Even the system acknowledges that power cannot simply be erased. The long-term inmate perspective. Some inmates spend decades moving through facilities like Lewisburg. Over time, they learn that survival depends on emotional discipline. The most successful long-term inmates avoid unnecessary alliances. Speak less than they observe. Do not chase status. Understand that attention is dangerous. They are not leaders. They are not enforcers. They are survivors. And in a place like Lewisburg, survival is its own form of resistance. When notoriety becomes a law, for most prisons, the walls mark the end of influence. For USP Lewisburg, they are only a filter. What truly separates Lewisburg from lower security institutions is not just who is inside, but how much of their reach remains intact. Despite isolation units, monitored calls, and strict mail regulations, power does not stop at the fence line. It adapts, fragments, and reroutes. This chapter examines how influence survives confinement, how gangs maintain external connections, and why total control inside a prison like Lewisburg remains an illusion. The federal illusion of containment. The Bureau of Prisons operates under a central assumption: limit contact, and you limit control. In theory, this is sound. Restrict phone calls. Monitor mail. Separate known leaders. Rotate housing. Isolate repeat offenders. But influence is not a physical object. It does not require proximity. It does not require frequency. It only requires continuity. Many inmates housed at Lewisburg entered the system long before arriving there. Their networks were established years, sometimes decades, earlier. Families, associates, legal representatives, and street-level operatives already existed. Lewisburg did not create these networks. It inherited them. Communication without conversation. Direct communication is heavily monitored. Every phone call is recorded. Every letter is screened. Even legal correspondence is subject to scrutiny under specific circumstances. So communication evolves. Messages are rarely explicit. Instructions are embedded in routine conversation. Dates, numbers, and names are referenced casually. Meaning is implied, not stated. A sentence that sounds harmless to an outsider can carry layered significance to someone trained to interpret it. This is not improvisation. It is learned behavior. Many inmates refine this skill across years of incarceration, adapting each time the system tightens restrictions. The role of outside proxies. Perhaps the most effective method of extending influence beyond Lewisburg is delegation. Inmates do not need to act directly if someone else is willing to act for them. Outside proxies may include family members, romantic partners, former associates, sympathetic contacts, legal intermediaries abused for access. These individuals may not understand the full scope of what they are facilitating. Some believe they are helping with paperwork, finances, or emotional support. Others knowingly participate. The prison restricts the inmate. It cannot fully restrict the outside world. Money as a silent weapon. Financial influence remains one of the least visible but most powerful tools. Money moves quietly. Commissary accounts. Outside deposits. Legal funds. Support payments. All of it creates leverage. Inside Lewisburg, money can resolve disputes without violence. Secure protection. Influence housing dynamics. Reduce pressure from enforcers. Outside Lewisburg, money sustains loyalty. Even modest financial assistance can maintain influence over individuals who rely on it. And for organized groups, pooled resources amplify that power. The system monitors transactions, but interpretation is harder than detection. Gangs as long-term institutions. Prison gangs are not temporary alliances. They are institutions designed to survive leadership loss, incarceration, and fragmentation. Lewisburg has housed members of gangs that operate on generational timelines. When one leader is isolated or transferred, another assumes responsibility. If communication breaks, fallback protocols exist. Rules are standardized. Discipline is predictable. Loyalty is enforced over time. This institutional memory is what makes total disruption nearly impossible. You can isolate a man. You cannot isolate an idea that has already spread. Coded identity and symbolism. Even under strict regulation, identity persists. Subtle markers, language choices, grooming habits, movement patterns, signal affiliation without explicit declaration. These signals are difficult to penalize because they exist in gray areas. Inside Lewisburg, identity is often reinforced through restraint rather than expression. What an inmate refuses to do can be as revealing as what he does. Silence can be allegiance. Non-participation can be resistance. Obedience to unofficial rules can signal rank. This silent signaling allows influence to persist without triggering disciplinary action. The administration's countermeasures. Lewisburg is not passive. Intelligence officers analyze patterns relentlessly. Transfers are used strategically. Communication privileges are adjusted. Informants are cultivated. Data is cross-referenced across facilities. Sometimes this dismantles networks. Sometimes it only reveals how resilient they are. One of the greatest challenges staff face is distinguishing leadership from symbolism. Removing the wrong individual can destabilize a unit. Leaving the right individual in place can maintain order. Control, in this environment, is never absolute. The cost of external reach. Maintaining influence beyond Lewisburg carries risk. Each communication increases exposure. Each proxy becomes a potential liability. Each transaction leaves a trail. Some inmates lose everything when networks collapse, betrayed by associates, intercepted by investigators, or abandoned when usefulness fades. Others adapt by scaling back. The most dangerous figures are often not the loudest or most active, but the ones who know when to retreat. When power finally ends. For some inmates, influence eventually dissolves. Age weakens authority. Transfers disrupt continuity. Outside associates move on. New leaders emerge. Prior reputations fade. This decline is rarely dramatic. It happens quietly. Calls go unanswered. Messages lose urgency. Names stop carrying weight. And for men who once shaped entire yards, that silence can be more devastating than confinement itself. The psychological toll of invisible power. Maintaining influence without physical presence creates strain. Paranoia increases. Trust narrows. Every interaction is scrutinized. Every delay feels threatening. Some inmates become obsessed with control, attempting to manage too much from too far away. Others surrender influence deliberately, choosing personal survival over dominance. Lewisburg forces this decision. You cannot hold everything forever. Closing reflection. USP Lewisburg was built to contain bodies, but it has never fully contained power. Influence survives through adaptation, patience, and systems that predate incarceration itself. Every restriction forces innovation. Every barrier reshapes behavior. Behind the walls, the battle is not just between inmates and the institution, but between permanence and erosion.